Yeah, I got lucky. Yeah, some did, he didn't want to go, so we didn't go. I told him, if I do, better get in history.
And my brother-in-law and I went out
We didn't
6
start.
mornings in a row looking for 3 o'clock. And every day we came this close.
Oh,
Our blind was on the wrong spot. There was a fence that couldn't get.
Oh, I
It
hate
was all fallen stock.
Yeah.
And we were 10 yards yesterday and lost this.
that's hard.
It was fun. Definitely a good weekend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Isn't that fun?
Well, Saturday was very nice.
Okay.
Yesterday and
Thank you for being here tonight. Being with these on. Check. Oh, there we go. Thank you. All right, we'll try this again. I'll call the meeting to order. And first order of business is the seating of newly elected board members. We'd like to welcome Carl. Congratulations on being elected to the Board of Education. All 3 new board members have taken their oath of office. Also went through orientation process and appreciate again your service to the school district. Jamie, could you please take a roll call on?
Chris Freeman,
here.
Mark Hillman,
Here.
Connie Husky, here, Clint Moses,
Here.
Carl Palmer,
Here.
Amy Rule Swanson,
Here.
Charlie Snyder,
Here.
Angie Skillings,
Here.
David Steyer.
Here.
So the first item on the action agenda is the election of board officers for the year. And at this time, are there any nominations for the office of president? Clint?
I nominate David Steyer.
Okay, we have a nomination by Clint Moses. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none, at this time I would entertain a motion to close nominations and cast approval with unanimous consent.
I so moved.
Okay, motion by Paul, second by Schneider. Jamie, please take the roll.
Chris Freeman,
Yes.
Mark Miller,
Yes.
Tanya Husby. Yes. Clint Moses,
Yes.
Carl Palmer,
Yes.
Amy Earl Swanson. Yes. Charlie Schneider,
Yes.
Andy Skilling. Yes. David Sayer.
Yes.
Congratulations, Dave. The rest of the meeting is yours.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank you. Want to welcome everybody here tonight as well. Thanks for coming out. And it's nice to see Steve Hansen back again, so thanks, Steve, for coming tonight and filming for us. Okay, now we'll move on to Vice President. I'll take nominations for Vice President. Any nominations for Vice President? Tanya?
I nominate for Lee Schneider.
Charlie Schneider, any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Now I'll take a motion to close nominations and cast the unanimous ballot for Charlie Schneider. Is there a motion?
Yep.
Chris, is there a second? Angie, thank you. Do we have to do roll call vote, or can we do voice? We only have one candidate. Let's do the other one. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, congratulations, Charlie. We'll go now to treasurer. Take nominations for treasurer. It's so quiet. Nominations for treasurer.
I'll nominate Tom Houston.
Tom Husby has been nominated for treasurer. Anybody else? Are there any other nominations for treasurer? Any other nominations? If not, I'll take a motion to close the nominations and cast the unanimous ballot for Tommy Husby for treasurer.
I so moved.
Mark, is there a second? Carl, I'm sorry. Carl, and a second by Chris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Carl. Now moving down to clerk. Nominations for clerk. Nominations for clerk.
I nominate Clint.
Clint has been nominated for clerk. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Take a motion to close nominations and cast the unanimous ballot for Clint Moses for clerk. Charlie, is there a second? Angie, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Clint. Okay. Now we're next on committee assignments, Joe.
Yes.
Okay, I think we'll just start kind of at the top on these and work our way down. If there's something that you're passionate about or want to be on, please speak up. We'll start with the health insurance, health medical insurance committee representative. Carl, how close are you to that?
I can be.
Well, I just, if you have somebody that has experience in that, it'd be good to have. Sure. Anybody else interested in that? If you go to your attachments, Angie, underneath, it'll say board member assignments, 2021, 2022. Yep, okay, so we have Carl for that one. Move down to the second one, high school graduation delegates. Typically, we'll have at least 3 people, sometimes 4, helping to hand out graduation certificates this year. We try to get preference if anybody has family or close relation that's graduating if they want. And go from there. I will say I do have a niece graduating this year.
Oh, no, not my girlfriend, no, it's just a question. What day is graduation again? Sunday, what day?
Sunday, May 30th.
Yes, I'll do it.
We have Amy, I'd be interested, anybody else? Carl? Clint? That's our 4, that's okay. If anybody else wants to do it, we certainly can.
So we can do 4 then, Dave, or we can have one for an alternate?
I think do 4, because I know at times things come up and people can't make it, so let's plan on 4. My niece is towards the end of the alphabet, so I can get that started. Okay, TIP review board. Last year, Jim was on the TIP review board. We did have a couple things that did come up through that. Anybody have any interest in that?
I would take it.
Charlie? I think that would be great. It's not like a fee, so. Anybody else interested in that? Okay, Charlie Schneider for the TIF review for CISA convention delegate. We have 2 delegate, things on here. One's for CISA, the other one is for WASB. I think was Penny our CISA delegate last year?
Yes. Yeah, there's a meeting up in Turtle Lake, it's a one night.
First one in, you have to go turtle rate and it lasts, the Fiji, sometimes,
Sounds like you have experience with it.
at least snacks anyway.
Anybody interested in that? Tanya? Okay. WASB convention delegate. We need, 2 people for this, 1 main and then an alternate in case is the convention going to be in person this year? I believe?
Plans right now are to have an in-person convention, I believe it's the 3rd week in January down in Milwaukee.
Amy, you've typically done this, correct?
I consider me again, it's gonna be a fun.
Anybody else interested in doing it? One of the things that you do have to do is sit through the, resolutions and that, right?
Basically what it is you, have to participate, it starts at like usually, the first day of the convention, it starts like at 1 o'clock and it goes to 5 o'clock if need be. And it's based on all the resolutions that boards have, sent in and have been approved by the resolution committee, which we have board members from the state. And then, those, resolutions are read and then there's discussion and debate and then voted on. And last year, I think there were 20 resolutions we voted on. Sometimes it varies, you know, 20 is about average. I say there could be more, there could be less, and that's what it takes. It's a lot of listening and paying attention to what is going on.
Anybody else interested? Amy, you can be our main delegate. Is there anybody that wants to be an alternate? We've got state convention typically held in Milwaukee. Angie? Okay. Transportation contract rep, I have done that for many years. I'd be interested in doing that again. Basically, it's 1 or 2 meetings a year. You sit down with the house and go over the new contract for transportation, that kind of stuff. If somebody else is really interested, speak up, otherwise. QIC committee, we need 2 representatives for that one. Joe, how many meetings?
Probably quarterly. This year was obviously different with COVID, but hopefully next year we get back to quarterly meetings.
The QIC meets with the teachers, staff in the district, and some administrators as well.
Usually the hourly group meets in the late afternoon or mid-afternoon around 2:30, and then the teacher group comes in usually around 4.
So we need 2 representatives on that committee. Mark? Sorry. Carl? One more, please. Charlie? Carl and Charlie for the QRC committee. Diversity committee? Chris? Anybody else for the diversity committee? How many meetings a year on that?
That's also a quarterly meeting typically.
Okay, so Chris? Anybody else? Amy? Okay, Chris and Amy. Okay, that takes care of our committee assignments. Thank you, everybody. Move on to appointing deputy clerk. I would ask for a motion from the floor to appoint our executive assistant as the deputy clerk.
One thing to add, Jamie has announced that she'll be retiring at the end of June, so it'd be good to build into the motion that the executive assistant, Jamie Kristen, whoever holds the spot after her.
Yeah, that's kind of why I said executive assistant.
Perfect, thank you.
So,
I so move that we, have the deputy secretary be whoever the, executive assistant and teacher.
thank you, Amy. Is there a second? Second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, set date and venue of our annual meeting. Currently set for August 23rd, 2021 at 6 p.m. Need a motion, and it's set to be at the Cube Lecture Hall at the high school. So that's for a motion for that, please. Charlie moves, there's a second. Tanya, any discussion? Amy?
There'll be a board meeting at 5 o'clock, is that correct?
Yes, typically.
In the library, typically, yeah. Thanks, Amy. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, item E, establish starting times for regular, special, and committee of the whole meetings. Currently, we set at 5:30. If you remember, 8 years ago, we used to have one at 5 and one at 6. It was really confusing for the public as to know what time the meetings actually started. So we've been a 5:30 consistent start time in the past few years. We ask for a motion for that, please. Chris, is there a second?
Second.
Amy? Any discussion? Anybody rather start at 4 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night? Okay, seeing no discussion, let's vote. All those in favor, say, of having our meeting times set at 5:30 p.m. for all various regular, special, and committee of the whole meetings, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We'll take a motion to adjourn the reorganizational meeting. Angie, is there a second? Tanya, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. We stand adjourned. Okay. At this time, I'd like to call our special board meeting to order. Jane, would you take the roll, please?
Chris Freeman. Here. Mark Stillman.
Here.
Ronnie Husey. Here. Clint Melton.
Here.
Carl Palmer.
Here.
Amy Rose Swanson.
Here.
Charlie Schneider.
Here.
Andy Skilling.
Here.
David Starr.
Here. Thank you. We have a forum to conduct business. One thing for, especially new board members too, with these mics, you almost gotta be on top of them when you talk, if people can't hear you, so when you do talk, make sure you got the mic good and close to your face, otherwise it won't project well. Okay, we'll move on to item 1C, agenda order and approval revision. Anybody have anything? Amy?
I would like to, on the personnel consent agenda, I would like to take the social studies, eighth grade social studies out and so we can move on to accommodations.
We'll move that to the action. A4. A4. Thank you. Chris?
I'd like to make a recommendation, change the motion, we modify it, and moving that to the, closed session, just because to have a robust discussion on all the ancillary aspects of that situation, it might be better served in a closed session.
We have two motions on the floor. We don't have a second for our first motion yet. Is there a second for Amy's motion?
Actually,
Actually, I think you could just take it.
Oh, for yours, I'm
No
sorry.
questions asked, Robert's order.
My bad. But to go to consent or to go to close,
right, that would be different. That would be it. Board approval meeting.
okay, so Amy would like it removed from the personal consent agenda, split up by itself.
Yes.
Okay. So Chris, you would like it moved into closed session?
I think we have as well.
Yes. Is there a second to your motion, to Chris's motion?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to move it to closed. Chris, any debate, anybody?
No.
Requires, is it a 2/3 vote to move it to closed?
No.
Not just,
Majority?
the agenda had been approved and it would.
Okay. So the motion is to move the item for the 8th grade language arts, social studies position into closed session. Jamie, would you take the roll, please?
Chris Freeman,
Yes.
Mark Tillman,
No.
Connie Bucci,
No.
Cliff Moses,
Yes.
Carl Palmer,
Yes.
Amy Riddle Swanson,
Yes.
Charlie Schneider,
No.
Andy Skillings,
No.
David Steyer.
No.
Your sales.
Okay, motion fails 5-4. 4-5. Any other agenda order approval revisions? Chris?
So does that revert then to an action item?
Yes. Go back to Amy's original ask. Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to recommendations and accommodations. We have none for tonight. Next, we have community communications. I do have 2 of them. If you have any, I ask that you bring them forward, please. Also, Jeannie has one that she is going to, if the board's okay with that, have her read all that was sent in by email. Is everybody okay with that? I think we'll do that one first because she received it first.
If anybody else has any sheets, go ahead and bring them up, please.
All right, the communication received is from Laurel Frayer, F-R-A-H-E-R. Says, hello, I would like to submit this comment for tonight's school board meeting. Dear members of the school board, I would like to address you today to express my shock and confusion at learning that Jason Collins will not be returning to his 8th grade language arts teaching position next year. I understand that Mr. Collins opted to teach virtually this year because of his own health concern regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. I do not understand why Mr. Collins was made to interview for his original position, given that his move to teach virtually was one of many temporary changes that have taken place in our district this year. Further, I am at a complete loss for how his replacement was found to be more qualified, given that Mr. Collins has been a passionate and committed educator in the language art classroom for over a decade. reached out to Mr. Fetcher at the middle school and been told that he cannot discuss personnel decisions. And so I am turning to the school board. I will ask you to look at this from my perspective as a parent of a seventh grader. I know how passionate Mr. Collins is about language arts, how loved he is by his students, and what a positive impact he has had during his time at Menomonie Middle School. It is hard to understand why this administration would not strive to retain a dedicated teacher such as Mr. Collins. It's even harder to understand how Mr. Collins was found to be less qualified than his replacement. Menomonie is a community that cares deeply for its teachers. I hope you can understand why this decision leaves me and many other parents, students, and community members feeling devastated.
Dr. Gray. Mouth Pruitt? Mark, I'm sorry. Mark, if you could come forward, have a seat at the table, make sure the mic is turned on. State your name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Dr. Mark Pruitt. I live at 910 Oakwood Boulevard here in Menomonie. And I'm here tonight to talk about my son and teacher, Cte Coordinator. Why am I here though? I have no children in the school system. However, I've been an educator all my life, and I come from a family of educators, and I care deeply about education. And at first I should tell you a little story. I am not from Menomonie, although I've lived here for 35 years. I grew up in Texas, and I remember my 8th grade language arts teacher, who's also a coach, and this is the only memory I have of middle school is the terrible language arts class that we had. It was the only thing I remember reading was the English lyrics to the Allocations. And I remember this so vividly because it was really a kind of scarring moment in my youth. I asked the English teacher what the lyrics meant, what was going on with, the song I'm talking about. Eleanor Rigby sits in Oliver Kinsey writing words to a sermon that no one will hear, no one can hear. There were all these characters being unhappy and in trouble. And I said, what does it mean? And he took the last image of a jar, wearing her face as she sits in a jar by the door, where it's at work. And he made up this copyright story that's haunted me now. Every time I get a song, I think of how he mangled the explanation of that all the time. That is not what the song is about. It's both lyrics don't say that. I think that many children around the United States would be really fortunate to have Cte Coordinator teacher. I've seen him, well, the first time I saw him, at a church in town where I was a musical director and organist. Like he came up and was talking to my pastor, and I was lit to eavesdrop, just intentional. And he was talking about how he had a son that was, going to be in school and was debating. And he said, my main concern is that I want no kind of discrimination in this area, in this church. I thought, that made an impression on me. And then as time went on, we became better friends. And I noticed one time,
Thank you, Mark.
is it? Okay, just finish up story. Okay. I found out that he was teaching flowers for Alvin in his class. And that made an impression on me that he would teach a book that was into the plight of the disabled. And as I learned his teaching repertoire, his curriculum, I was always impressed with everything he did. And I even read Flowers for Algernon again because of that. He inspired me to do that and to read, and I can't imagine what his students must experience on the same level. I value him as a friend. He's a genius musician. And I think my life is significantly different in terms of my racial conception of races. Had I had a teacher like Mr. Collins in eighth grade especially, because I grew up with racism. It was in my church, it was in my house, it was everywhere until I got out of middle school. It was still there. It was always tough. But if I read I Am Luella in eighth grade, I think I must have been significantly different earlier. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. At this point, I'd like to call,
Ryan, could you check the mic, please?
I'm sorry, Bonnie Detlaw.
Thanks, Tonya.
Thank you.
Bonnie, if you could state your name, your address,
Yes, I have it all written down here.
you have 3 minutes.
My name is,
It's on, Donnie.
right,
Oh, no, you don't have to sit, I'm just telling you it's on the microphone.
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fine, okay. My name is Bonnie DeHoff. I live at 813 Tanger Street in Menomonie. We have resided in Menomonie over 35 years, and I am a taxpayer. Good evening, members of the school board, Dr. Sadowski, and everyone else. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I trained as an art teacher and have taught art at St. Joseph School in Menomonie and substituted in the school district for about 10 years at all levels, including teaching homebound students. The reason for my presence is that I believe that Mr. Jason Collins should be teaching students in language arts, his field, in person in a classroom with students at our middle school. Excluding him prevents a very talented and dedicated teacher from interacting with students on a daily basis. I don't know Mr. Collins personally, and I have said hi maybe a couple of times, but I know him by reputation and have heard him speak. He is also a wonderful musician. To be a teacher today in America is one of the hardest professions one can aspire to. Many parents have probably learned how hard it is to teach 1 to 5 of their own children this past year. I'm very glad I'm a grandmother and I didn't have to. Think what a 6 to 7 day period of 20 to 30 different students per class is like all day long, all week long, all year long. Teaching? A teacher knows, as Mr. Collins does, that in every class, each student comes with different expectations, emotions, preparation, background, family, and cultural issues. And whatever has happened already in the day with peers. Teaching requires years of study, preparation, reworking lesson plans to suit individual needs, diplomacy, and an openness to what is occurring in and at the moment. Exaggeration to say. 150 students a teacher makes every day, there will be a family crisis, worries, self-doubt, and personality issues among students. Teaching and working in a school is an organic living process that teachers intuitively instruction and the class evolves. Every class is different because each class is composed of entirely unique individuals. Mr. Collins is a teacher who tries to teach truth to his students, to open their minds and challenge perceived ideas. Literature is the great narrative people own. Every culture has a narrative. Every one of us does. Literature is how people to each other. A language arts teacher introduces the myriad journeys of persons living now and in the past through world history. Language arts teachers are at the heart of the great humanities curriculum, and we are incredibly fortunate to have such a gifted teacher as Mr. Collins is among us. Please allow him back in the classroom where he belongs and where his talents, insights, and understanding will influence our middle school students throughout their lives. One more thing. I read recently in the New York Times that psychologists and neuroscientists believe that the two most critical times in a child's mental and emotional development are between the ages of 1 and 3 and middle school. We have an excellent middle school faculty, and Mr. Collins should be teaching there in person with the students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yes, I've read the mention before, but if you have copies of your statement, if you could please email them in to Joe, and that way it can be shared with the board. And
Email them to who?
to our superintendent, Dr. Zadowski, please.
It's not required, but if you would like it entered into the record, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Mark also.
Can someone give me the email address, or do I find it on your webpage?
Yeah, it's right in the webpage, or you're welcome to call, or we can give you a card.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Haley, accept one in? Okay. Same thing, Haley. Name, Hallie?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, school board members. My name is Hallie Bohr, and I'm a junior at Menomonie High School. I want to address the board on the topic of what will be talked about in closed session later tonight. I figured putting a face to a name would help, and I wanted to give my input since I'm not sure if I'm allowed to attend this part of the meeting. To provide a little background, I had signed up for an AP art class and the advanced 3D design for next year. I've taken every art class provided other than the AP art class and 3D design that have both been canceled for next year. With the early college credit program being due on March 1st, I made the choice not to register based on the information available to me that the classes I selected were going to run. I was informed on March 2nd by my school counselor that these classes were dropped. My counselor told me as soon as she found out because she knows how important art is to me. That means had this information been available to her and even me 1 day sooner, I would have still been eligible to apply for the ECCP. The decision for these classes to not run had been approved at a board meeting 6 days prior to the deadline. It is upsetting to me and many others that communication from the board down to the students was missing when it came to telling these students and their families that the classes were not running. In that time, had those decisions been shared with me and other students like me, we would have had the opportunity to make different plans for next year. I'm extremely passionate about art, and it is part of who I am. I'm very grateful to have gone to a school district that has provided me with so many different opportunities in art. I learned so much from my classes and my teachers, and want to continue building my skills and passion. I'm frustrated to think that I may not be able to continue building my skills and passions next year due to a lack of communication, paperwork deadlines. I worked with my counselor to build my schedule around opening up my senior year to focus on my art studies. My future career is wanting to go into art education. I feel disappointed that we didn't have the opportunity to make the best choice for me because of the lack of communication within the district. My parents and I have gone to every level of administration, and we have been unable to find a resolution that helps me continue to grow as an artist. This has led me to you this evening. I'm asking that you continue to invest in my learning and passion for art as I enter my senior year. I'm really looking forward to making art my main focus next year, and without being able to be in the AP art class or the ECCP, that focus is lost. I'm asking for your consideration to pay for my first term art classes at UW Stout or consider running the classes. The Menomonie School District has made it a priority to support students to pursue their passions and help prepare them for the future. I ask for the same opportunity to be provided to me. Please don't let a lack of communication affect my educational path and my future. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, okay, that is all the communications I have for you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is item F, board member, superintendent communications. Board members? Okay. Dr. Zadowski.
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the personal consent agenda. Just a note for those of you that may be new, if you refresh your computers at some point, it'll refresh the agenda as it's been changed. So if you try and follow along in your computer, that'll be up to date. what the motions are. Okay, personal consent agenda, action to approve personnel actions. Motion to approve. Chris, is there a second? Charlie? Any discussion?
I do want to point out that there was a late addition, at Oakland Elementary School. They were able to decide on a candidate for one of the math interventionist positions. So I just want to call that to the board's attention tonight.
Any questions? Okay, Jamie, let's go. Motion carries by unanimous vote 9-0. Okay, move on to the action agenda. Item 3A, approve the clean energy resolution. Motion to approve. Amy, is there a second?
Yeah.
Chris. Discussion. Chris, why don't you start since you revised the resolution?
Okay, this resolution has been a work in progress. Over a year and 2 months. So, after a number of deliberations and corporation defense, I believe that everyone's requests have been made, and this is something that we need to get done that we can all agree on. If anyone has any, specific reasons they'd like to amend, please make sure you do that now, so that you don't let a vote, kill a resolution we've been working for a long time. It's not as robust as one that was passed. That's unfortunate, but it still has got, some power to it, and it gives a good understanding of where our values are, as a district, and that we're heading in the right direction. The resolution makes, non-binding, commitments to making a better energy practice in the district, but also gives, some goals and some directionality in terms of what we teach in the classroom and realizing those at the very highest level of the SDN. Thanks.
I just have one question. The second from the bottom, be it further resolved that the district, and then I have suggestion, add, will, shall is better word, identify grants and other external funding resources to assist in our efforts to.
Does anyone have a suggestion how to clean that up? Does anyone prefer will or shall? I prefer will, but I think this is Jim said it, back when he was a board member, and he preferred shall. And no. So I move to,
Well, how about a friendly amendment between you and Amy, since you made the motion in a second? Which way you guys want it?
Will is fine.
Okay, Chris, okay? So that one shall read, be it further resolved that the district will identify grants and other external funding resources to assist in our efforts to implement these goals. Okay? Any other discussion? Charlie?
I'd like to just ask a clarifying question. I missed what you said, Chris, about, did you reference the city of Menomonie?
I think so, the one they did pass in the city council, hopefully the more robust one, but I mean, that's fine. We're all feeling Menomonie going in the right direction.
In my opinion, this is, back to the discussion we had at the last meeting. The city of Menomonie resolution only references electricity, not entire district operational needs. So, again, what I requested last month, is, still, it didn't get changed. What I requested matches what the city passed.
So I can make up my name on it?
One thing that, before we go any further, I meant to mention this earlier, but I didn't. Keep in mind that on agenda items, each board member can, according to Robert's Rules of Order that the board has adopted, speak twice on each motion. if they have a clarifying question, they should, as Charlie did state, have a clarifying question, and they're allowed up to 3 minutes on each time to speak on that, so. I forgot to mention it before. So. Amy?
I guess I would like to say whether it's robust or not, the city council did the right thing, and I think we do the right thing too, so that we are, in line with the community.
Mark?
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, being new to this. There was a plan for this energy deal put in place back in a meeting back in February, is that correct?
We did, as Chris said, we've been working on this resolution for a long time.
Right.
When we tabled it, our decision was to bring it back at the February meeting. At that time, Charlie did a lot of work on the policy change to address our clean energy policies. We've also last year hired a energy director to help with, how the facilities, energy uses and things of that nature are handled. So there was, and that energy policy does have some specific things in it as far as the district looking at alternative energy and things of that nature. So it's actually policy, whereas this is a resolution that, being quite honest, doesn't have any teeth in it, whereas the policy does. I mean, I think you have a timeline in the chart of 6 months to come up with certain things beneficial to the district in certain areas, things of that nature. So.
I guess that's where I was going with it. I mean, a plan is a plan, a policy is a policy. And this resolution, to me, being new, is just so incredibly vague that there's no meat and potatoes to it. That's my opinion.
Cool.
When we initially talked about this about a year ago, I had suggested to the board that the board consider a policy. We have processes in the district, where we are policy-based, and really that's where we can, provide results to the board through policy, or printed or something, or hung up in the boardroom here, but the policy is really where the work's going to get done. So my preference as a district administrator is to work through policy rather than resolutions.
Chris?
And just to respond to Mark's question about how the two pieces kind of work together to do different things. So like, as an institution, of course, we've got mission statement and values. And people might say that those mission statements and values don't do anything, but they represent who we are. And they help give it identity. You could say most of the brands what we do in type of education that we kind of present. And so to think that policy stands in for that aspect of any institution's commitment to the community is kind of like missing the point of why we have, mission statements and values. And so I can understand how that would be confusing, but this is building on the way that we're creating an understanding for the community about what we stand for. And that we kind of are committed to making a realization of those things as a board, as a district. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. So why don't we have this a clean energy mission statement?
I mean, I suppose we could amend it and then add it to amending a mission statement, but that would make a mission statement kind of clunky because mission statements are usually kind of short and clean, but it's great in stating of what we are and kind of framework.
Any other discussion? Anybody that hasn't spoke? Clint, Carl?
You know, I do see value in some resolutions because they do give a little more direction to the mission, vision, and the strategic plan. We don't change the strategic plan every meeting or every 6 months. To me, as a non-binding piece, I like to feel that it reinforces where we're trying to get to without having to go through a deep dive into strategic plan. And again, as non-binding, we have flexibility, and if the board wishes to come back and modify this 2 years from now, if technology or cost change, we can do that too.
Any other discussion? Charlie?
I guess the only thing that I would add is, nearly everything in the resolution is covered in the policy. There are a couple of things that are not, in my mind, related to clean energy directly. They're related to sustainability, but not directly to clean energy, that are in the resolution, that are not in the policy. But other than that, the energy pieces are each and every one covered in the policy itself. And it is binding, and I personally like that. To hold the district to those binding rules to say, we will do something, not we'll think about it, and I just see the two very different things.
I know we haven't talked about it much as a board, but I think this new individual that we hired on in the energy manager position is going to do some really neat things for the district. I've heard some good things so far coming forward. And I'm excited with the policy change that we've had, and some of the things that are coming out in the district. So I just, I've never been, when we first brought up the idea of the resolution, I wasn't a big fan of it. I agree with Charlie, I'm more of a nuts and bolts kind of a guy, but we all have our different preferences. Amy?
Will we get a report from the energy manager at some point?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's part of the policy.
Any other discussion?
One last thing I'd like to add is that there seems to be some people think out there that because this may not pass, that we're not for clean energy, and that is not at all the case. It's a difference of policy versus a resolution. And in my mind, the policy is a better thing because, again, it has milestones, and it has things that we will do, not things that we will think about doing. So in my mind, it's a better way to go, and it will get us there faster. In my opinion.
One question, as brand new, how long do we use the brand new? Does this board have a history of using resolutions at all? Is this the first one to come before the board in 2 years, or is there lots of resolutions? Can someone give us a background on that, as new folks?
Joe?
Typically, a resolution would be used if the board is going to make a statement and share with legislature or representatives, things of that sort. Generally, resolutions are not used by this board. Typically, it's policy-based.
Chris?
Just added, we actually just tried to pass another resolution that was voted down. So we do try to do these things, they do have value for people, and what's more important is that these things are supported by people in the community, and those of you who haven't been on the board maybe haven't realized or received all of it is the support to go along with making statements for school that respond to our values. So I think we were talking about discussing this again, and we did that every time. But there's a history that obviously a lot of people have to have
Anybody else that still has time left to talk? Okay, let's vote. Amy? The yes would be to approve the resolution, and no vote would be to deny.
So new board members, if you look at your screen, it should prompt you for a vote, yes or no.
Or extension. Motion fails on a 4 to 5, with 4 yes, 5 no. Item 3B, approve the middle school, Romney Middle School easement. Your motion to approve?
Yeah.
Chris? Your second? All right, thank you. The 14th, getting you guys to. Right. Joe?
Information's in the background for the board, and this was talked about back on February 22nd. But for the new school board members, there is going to be a road project over by the middle school. The city of Menomonie has talked to us about extending the bike path over there. And to do that, an easement would be needed, and we think it's a good project, and we are recommending the board's approval.
Any questions? Tanya?
So you and I talked after the meeting in regards to stop signs on that. Is that something that is school related or would that be something city related to put up?
We haven't figured out the details on that yet, Tanya, but between the city or the school, I think that's something we can get done.
Any other questions? Chris?
Just commentary that, entrance to Menomonie Middle School is super dangerous, especially for bikers. And I'm really happy that you guys are finding ways to keep those kids safe. Because that's about the last stage in the children's development where they still think bicycles are cool. And there's a number of bikes that are at that, and it's rewarding to see that those kids are out there, you know, making their own locomotion to get to class. So keeping that safe, and then making that incredibly aware for people that are driving in there, that don't always see children on bikes, is gotta be a step forward for the district.
Spoken from a true bike ranger. Any other discussion? Okay, Jamie and Phil. Motion passes unanimously, 9-0. Item 3C, approve mask protocols for spring sports. A motion to approve.
I so moved.
Amy, second. Sorry.
As it states in the background, the athletic directors for the Big Rivers Conference got together to discuss masking protocols for spring sports. As you've seen in the news, some different communities are starting to do different things with mask use, and the athletic directors think it's important to try to have some sort of consistency. The recommendation is to require masks of all coaches, players, officials, spectators, with the exception of the participants when they're actively competing. You know, this could change depending on, you know, different levels of communities and subsequent recommendations from the WIA, but at this point, we are recommending moving forward with the conference recommendation.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Chris?
Just in practice, having been witnessing some sporting events, I hardly ever see a kid with a mask on anymore. Like, I know they say that how are they going to enforce that, sometimes up and sometimes down, the mask wearing by the athletes? I noticed that actually Menomie's been more progressive than most places in terms of how the mask compliance is operating. So I do see that our kids are at risk because a lot of other schools aren't as progressive in terms of making that mask a vital part of how they interact in the field.
Well, I can tell you from a little experience, and it's a little league experience. We've played 3 games so far, the 12-year-old AAA team. And the kids have done a really good job. They keep a mask in their back pocket, so when they're out in the field, you know, pitching, hitting, whatever, they have the mask in their pocket, and then when they come to the dugout, they put the mask on. And sometimes the kids need a reminder, but generally they do a pretty darn good job with it. And when you think about like a track meet or softball game or any of these other sports, I think having this direction is helpful, because otherwise I think you're going to see what you mentioned, Chris, where it's just going to turn into either constant enforcement, which the coaches, it's almost impossible to do that, or if they can set some realistic expectations that seem to work within the scope of the activity, I think it works a little bit better.
I've got a follow-up question. And this is just one thing I'm concerned, because of course I'm involved in soccer. But there has been, you know, some rising concerns about the changing mutations of the virus, and that's something that kids are becoming more susceptible in certain types of environments. And so my concern was raised because, you know, soccer is a really close contact sport in many ways. And really our team is the only team that's wearing a mask out there. So I was wondering if they had any ways in which they were trying to give specific guidance for rules for our coaches to make sure that our kids are going to be
competing at the same level as other teams. Because I can tell you by watching the kids play, our teams are at an advantage because they're morally trying to protect their opponents, but they're at a disadvantage because they got the mask on. And that's pretty hard to be running 90 minutes.
And that's just it.
The team does it.
And that's just it, Chris. That's one of the reasons why we're recommending approval of this, because right now our policy is masks on all the time, every event, no matter what. With the spring sports being outside, when you look at the transmission rates outside and within competition, it just hasn't shown to be a major issue at this point. But again, that could change, like you mentioned with the new variants. There's a lot of things that could continue to change, and if that's the case, we certainly will bring it back. But I didn't want to give approval for them to not use the mask to go against our plan unless the board was going to approve it.
Questions? Charlie?
Who enforces it? The coach or the referee?
The coach does. Yeah, the WI has been pretty clear about that.
Any other questions? Okay, Jamie, that's it. Motion passes 8-0 with 1 abstention. Okay, item 3D, action to approve the employment of Logan Seymour, 8th grade social studies teacher at the Menomonie Middle School effective August 17, 2021. Motion to approve. Charlie, is there a second? Tanya? Again, this was moved from the consent agenda to the action agenda. Any questions or discussion?
I'd just like to say the reason I'm doing this, and I asked for this to be done, is because we already hired a social studies teacher, 8th grade teacher last meeting. And we had a change that was changed and that the other candidate was moved into the language arts position. And I just think it was kind of a false pretense without me.
Chris?
The main consideration that we have to have is to know that this, do you guys need something?
I don't have a 3D on my computer.
You have to read that. The top, under board docs, there's a little circle to the right. Click on that, and then it'll take you out, and you gotta come back into board docs, and then it'll add 3D.
Got it.
Sorry.
I'm always confused by these things, every meeting basically, but anyway, I can appreciate that. Okay, so the main thing that we have to be concerned with on the board is that this hire is linked to other decisions that happen upstream. So it appears that this hire is, following normal protocol, but it's tied to some other hiring decisions that from a board perspective, we need to look at more closely. So one of the things we need to think about is that in order for this position to be vacant, that position that was formerly hired for, that Amy is talking about, had to have been vacated, and thinking about the process by which that happened is really important. Because in order for that position to be filled by the person that's hired in social studies, there had to be a hiring process that needed to be followed. And it's my understanding that we didn't follow some more aspects of policy by which that we hire employees. That job had to be advertised for 5 days. That the hiring decision had to be made based upon that job posting, which was never made. And that when we think about how that hiring decision was made, we have to make sure as the board that our district is following policy. There's another piece to that too, that the thing to think about is why that position was vacant. That has some other questions that we need to think about as a board to make sure that our board direction, which was to create accommodations for our teachers who faced health issues with COVID, were taken care of.
And at a board, our discussion was trying to make sure that the teachers would be accommodated. And I think one board member said that all teachers who had a health issue should jump at this. So given the fact that we're making an accommodation for our teachers who are at risk, it seems that we need to hold administration accountable for making sure those teachers who took that option because of health conditions were provided for. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to think about, that as an oversight committee that we need to really address, is that there's a question that's different than maybe the way it's been framed up till now. We should not be asking ourselves what we can do. We gotta be asking ourselves what we ought to do. And given the range of complicated issues surrounding this particular decision to hire this particular social studies teacher that is connected to another hiring decision, where we have questions of policy, we have questions of the degree to which that the administration took direction from the board in regard to providing accommodations for our teachers, and for doing the right thing as a board to make sure that our values are implemented, especially for our teachers working hard during the pandemic. And it sends a lot of messaging to our community, to our staff. And just one more comment to those new hires, because they too are moved into a position that now appears to have some problems that we need to make sure that we have addressed.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other discussion? Chris?
I'd like to make a motion to table this decision to approve the hire until we have gathered all the facts regarding the other hiring decisions to which this is connected.
Is there a second?
Second.
There a motion and a second to table? No discussion? No discussion.
I would just say that if you table this and don't hire this individual, the chance of being able to hire a terrific employee may very well pass us by.
Any other discussion? What I'm wondering, is there discussion on the motion to table?
Oh, no.
There a motion to table and a second. Jamie, vote please.
So we're going to clarify, what are we voting on?
Chris made the motion, you seconded it to table, this here. Did you set a time so we could get more facts? I don't think you set a time specific
For the next board meeting.
for the next board meeting. So that was Chris's motion to table, Amy seconded it. Jamie?
I just had a comment because I think I'm allowed to speak twice.
My question to Joe was just, I didn't mean to let him talk. My question was, is there a discussion element to a motion to table? And I don't believe there is.
I misunderstood what you were asking me. There is no.
No discussion. Majority vote. So I apologize for that. Jamie?
Let's start with Mark.
No.
Tanya?
No.
Liz?
No.
Carl?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Charlie?
No.
Angie?
No.
David?
No.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Table, the motion to table fails by a 6-3 vote. Okay, back to our original motion. Any further discussion? We have one more discussion, right? Or is this your second?
I think I'm back to two, but I think I should be able to get it done in 1 point.
I think you just had one discussion now.
I'm good on that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. So, we talked about, what we can do and what we can get away with by, not being straight with, policy procedures. We talked about what we ought to do, but there's also the question of what we can't do. And what we can't do is change the terms of an accommodation that was made to a teacher in the district. That was a one-year accommodation. It was pitched as a one-year move into a temporary certification for teaching virtual as part of a one-year return to school reopening. To change the conditions of that is something we can't do. An employee who is given an option to teach virtually for 1 year with an emergency certification that was pitched as a one-year certification, or a one-year plan does not allow us to change the terms of that decision. So that's something we can't do. So we can't approve this hire because it puts us in a compromised situation in terms of how we did an accommodation, what was promised, and how the administration handled that. So now we're in a predicament that we can't hire this.
Thank you, Chris. Any other discussion? Carolyn?
I don't want to go into any more depth because it needs to not be an open session if we go any deeper than where we are.
It's just procedure.
But the reality is there's multiple positions that are open, there's multiple people that are into those positions. We can hire this person, we can hire another person. It doesn't, one doesn't necessarily affect the other, Chris. There are, like I said, multiple positions that are open here, so it doesn't necessarily play. Whether I agree with you or disagree on your earlier point, doesn't matter. This is a position, we can hire this person. The two aren't necessarily directly connected.
I'm sorry, Chris, to use both your discussion. Any other discussion? If you wish to make a motion to suspend the rules, you can, but it takes a 2/3 vote, so.
I'm not optimistic.
I'm just saying, the option is there. Any other discussion? Okay, Jamie, let's vote. Go right ahead.
I don't have a pop-up. Would you like my verbal vote? Yes. No. Oh, it just popped up. Oh, we don't
I've got it in already.
Okay.
Motion to hire passes by a 6-3 vote. Move on to discussion item, policy review. We'll start with item 4A, transition program report.
Okay, so this is kind of a first. Our transition coordinator, Jill Zadowski, is here with Tony Kwitzke, our Director of People Services. And Jill's going to fill the board in some of the work that's been done with our transition program. So, Jill, take it away.
You know, Joe?
Maybe.
Who's doing my slideshow? I will just,
Is your mic on, Joe?
Oh, wait.
Thank you.
So, hello, I'm Jill Podolsky, and I'm the SDMA Transition Coordinator. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Menomonie High School Transition Program. A lot of you are probably asking, what is a transition coordinator? And a transition coordinator is someone who helps prepare students for life after high school by serving as a link between the school district, community, local businesses, and resource providers. Transition services are required for all students with an individualized education program.
And currently at the high school, we have 10 case managers that oversee over 150 students with an IEP. And all those students do need a transition program over the age of 14.
Just a quick question, Jill. So there's 150 kids over 14 in the program, is that correct?
Yes. So some of those, some students do start transition in middle school. So some of them turn 14 and quite a few turn 14 in middle school, but at the high school, we have over 150 that are 14 and older with an IEP. Some things that we do for transition, the first one is Project Search, and Project Search is a one-year program for students who meet graduation requirements. We withhold their diploma for a year, and this allows the school to provide funding for this wonderful integrated employment opportunity. This year, we just had one student participate in Project Search Mail. But this coming year, we have 6 students accepted to Project Search Menomonie and 1 student accepted to Project Search Mail Clinic. We also were able to add in some tours last year of the Project Search facilities to be able to give students a hands-on idea of what Project Search is. And 14 students attended those tours. We also offer a parent resource fair, and this is an event for parents and students with disabilities to learn all about the services in our community. This was done before I got here, but then I took it over last year and it was scheduled for April, and it was supposed to be at the high school with an evening with 2 speakers, and that was scheduled due to COVID. We also provide Cbtc career tours. In the past, it was done for juniors and seniors, and we did sign up juniors and seniors last year, and we had 35 attend the event in December. But then we also were able to open it up to freshmen and sophomores, and we had 48 sign up. Then they were supposed to go in May, which was canceled. But, hopefully next year things will open up and we'll be able to give that opportunity, because we see the more opportunities we give these students, the more times they're able to see something, the more likely they're to follow through. We also work on business tours. Those are set up depending on interest. Last year, I took a group of students to River State Truck and Trailer over by Eau Claire, and to see the 3 different kind of aspects of their business. And I also set up job shadows for individual students. We did one in the area sign business, photography at the fire station, local industry and businesses. Another thing I help with is to monitor paid work experience in transportation. One key to transition is employment experience for students and getting these students to their jobs. Transportation is a big barrier for students. So I help coordinate a van driver at our school, call the cab company if we need it, and also set up busing if the bus goes that direction towards a student's job experience. But then I also work with and talk to the employers about how students are doing in their job. And one of the businesses we currently are working with is Goodwill. They have a wonderful school to work program, and right now we have 3 students working at Goodwill. I also help coordinate DVR services, and DVR is the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, and it provides supports and employment opportunities for students. Students who are 16 and older and have an IEP can apply for DVR, and a lot of families don't know what DVR is, so I inform families what DVR is, and then help refer the student. And then I explain the process to the student of what comes next after I refer. So look at the mail, sign the form, who's going to be calling them. And then if they are accepted into the program, I sometimes also attend their ITE meeting, which is their individual plan for employment. Some more things that we do at the high school. is I represent the SDMA at meetings on the county community on transition. They're called our CCAT meetings. And CCAT meetings are a group of stakeholders working to identify barriers in transition and discuss solutions for youth with disabilities. This year I became the facilitator of this group, and we are trying to kind of come up with some activities that we could maybe do, like a career Olympics with students, and kind of showcase some things they know and help them practice. I'm also really excited to talk about the paid work experience with the School District of Menomonie. As a transition coordinator, I worked with the food service and the custodial department at the high school to provide work opportunities for students in special education. The students are hired as SDMA employees, and they work a set schedule and they clock in and out and get paid. One student did start in this position and then was hired as a full-time employee through this. So it really is a neat way that we are including everyone. Another thing that I've been doing is working with our Cte Coordinator, which is a career and technical education coordinator, who is Ryan Sterry. So Ryan Sterry and I have been working together. He's been talking to me about Youth Apprentice. We're trying to set up a student in welding, the Employability Skills Certificate, which are certificates through the department, the State Department of Wisconsin. Students need to work over 90 hours in a school year. And so with my connections with all the students in special education, I have 10 students that have worked over those 90 hours. So I'll be contacting their employers to fill out this, and they'll be receiving a certificate that they can put in their resume. And then I've also been helping with the career fair with the chamber and ACP activities, the career planning activities that all high school students have to participate in. Ryan Sterry and I are also working and meeting with area businesses like the City of Menomonie and Cargill Glass to see how we can partner on providing our students with employment at these local businesses. We see that there's a need, employers need to hire people, and we have students to hire, and by working together, we can hopefully fit these needs. The Transition Readiness Grant I wrote last year, and we received that grant through the state. It was $40,250. A lot of that money was for transportation, and we were able to fund 30 students in the driving course and behind the wheel training for driver's ed, because transportation is a big barrier in transition. And so helping these students get the driver's license is a great thing. And the students range in age from 15 to 18. Another area that we were able to offer is we offered all paraeducators in the district an opportunity to take a paid course in transition. It was on job coaching if they wanted to, and it was a paid opportunity for them through that grant. And the last thing is post-school outcomes. We participate in a summer post-school outcome survey every year. What you do is you call graduates from the previous year and ask them transition questions. And each survey and each student that we can contact and they qualify, we get $1,000. So last year we got $20,000 from that survey. So what is next? What I'd like to continue doing is expanding partnerships with local businesses and communities. Since Ryan Sterry and I are working together, trying to kind of fill out kind of an outline in contact with other businesses like Wisconsin and Walmart DC and businesses, and try to keep this rolling. Continue to provide support to students, families, and SDMA teachers through assistance with the IEPs. And in the IEP, they have a PTP, which is a post-transition plan, and that's really where I come in and help and we set up goals. I'm going to continue to bridge gaps to critical services and opportunities, like touring project search, letting students know about the wonderful summer academy opportunities that Cbtc and our school district provide during the summer. Start college now classes and knowing those due dates and helping students get their applications in on time. Contacting Cbtc and DDR. And the newest thing we're working on is trying to add a teacher assistant course to the high school. This would be an opportunity for any high school student to earn credit while providing assistance in a special education classroom. It's a great opportunity for students in education, interested in education or human services field, and we feel it could be a win-win for the classroom setting and for the students. Kind of filling a need in both those areas. So we're kind of looking at getting that started at the high school. Thank you for your support of the transition program in SDMA. Are there any questions?
I don't have a question, but I would say this is amazing work from what I'm hearing of it. This is high value for kids that need it the most. So happy to hear the presentation today.
Thank you.
Just a part-time position?
Yes.
I think you must put it on there. A lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work, and it's been growing. I mean, last year kind of started off, but then it's like, oh, we have this, we have this. But it is very rewarding to get students in those positions and see how they can succeed.
I was gonna say, I bet you have some really neat success stories with kids and getting the applications and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next, move on to annual technology department report.
Okay, so we have our Director of Technology Services, Cte Coordinator, here for her annual update to the board. Cte, we're getting set up, but I just want to point out that, and I think the board members know this, with the pandemic hitting the tech department, I mean, talk about a department that was impacted. We were all impacted, but when all of a sudden you go from, being a one-to-one school 6th through 12th grade to essentially becoming a one-to-one school K through 12, and then trying to coordinate all the devices and all the services and all the apps and everything that was done. Cte and her team were up to the challenge, and I couldn't be more thankful and grateful for all their terrific work. So, Cte, thanks for taking time to be with us tonight, and the floor is yours.
Sure. So our staff for the technology team, we consist of 6 members. So myself, and then Morgan Segman is our database specialist. So she does all things Skyward, and is kind of a catch-all for our department. She is the first person most people have contact with when they call our office. And then we have 2 system administrators. They're the ones that do those updates at night. Make sure that like security patches, all of those things are taken care of. And then we have 2 help desk specialists that do most of the break fix work. Projectors, all the like hardware kind of troubleshooting. We have some stats for G Suite that's gone up a bit this year. We've been making a progressive movement to storing files in the cloud. So you'll see most of that is kind of stabilized, but if you look at the disk, you'll see that our overall storage has gone up quite a bit, almost doubled in the last year. And that's because of some of the records retentions that we have. So you'll see that, individuals kind of have the same amount of files, because most things are going to move there. We've been maybe collecting more things digitally. We're storing more things digitally within Google Drive. So there's a lot more PDFs and some things that aren't necessarily accounted for in those other stats. Help desk, this is really telling of the pandemic. So you'll see normally students put in a lot of tickets on their own, with many kids working off-site. A lot of teachers have been putting in tickets on students' behalf. We've also worked really hard to have our staff enter tickets versus just call in or email individual technicians. Anything that hits our ticketing system immediately sends an email to all 6 of us on that technology team. So then we're not kind of round robin calling to see who's at their desk because we do travel between all of the sites. In addition to our technical staff, at each building, we have some tech coaches to assist with teachers, and so that's more if they're looking for a tool to accomplish an educational or learning goal. So they do a lot of the instructional pieces. Like if I want to do a unit and have this be the end result, what are some tools that will allow me to accomplish this? That's what our coaches really focus on. I know we talk a lot as a board and as a district about home access. And there are several ways we collect that data through local surveys. A survey did go out through Skyward to collect data for the DPI this year. And so this is very reflective of the local data that we've collected. But I did put that together in a graphic so you can see.
Okay, what's the difference between without access and then due to availability? Does that mean that it runs by, but they just aren't hooked up to it?
So without access is overall who said they didn't have access within the district, and then there's 2 reasons. So the light blue and the red give the 2 reasons that make up that smaller dark blue portion. So in our district, we had 3.7% say they didn't have access. Of that 3.7%, 11% said it was due to affordability, and 80% said it was due to availability. So we know about the donuts and that there are some areas that just are not served by an internet service provider within our district boundaries.
Katie, I know that you said we know about the donut, but we do have some new board members. Could you really briefly just explain what the donut means?
Sure. So there's been a lot of study about where boundaries are for internet service providers. So there are some areas that just aren't served. There just isn't fiber or broadband available within those bounds. So that donut area is like right within Menomonie. There's pretty good availability. And then you get about 5 miles out of town and we start to see a ring where there's not availability. And then when you get so far out again, the number of service providers increases. In addition to that availability, even if people have availability, there are some students where the quality of the internet service may be unreliable for streaming video. So that would be, some people might say that they have internet because they have a mobile device, like a cell phone, that can be used as a hotspot, but that may not allow them to reliably stream video. And so these are the stats on that. And, you know, when you compare to our neighbors, we're pretty comparable there, but about 27% as opposed to the 3 that don't have access say that they still have trouble streaming. And of that, the majority just have issues with interruptions. And then there are about 16% who just can't stream at all. And that would be probably more of a cell phone hotspot connection. This year too, I think the stat is there's like a 725% increase in phishing attacks between healthcare and education due to COVID. It's just probably what keeps us up at night the most, and worrying about the cybersecurity aspect, especially with the increased vulnerability of moving things to the online environment. This year we did purchase KnowBe4, and it allows us to do some training. So all staff members completed a 15-minute training on cybersecurity. We also sent out some kind of fake phishing emails to see who would click or who would report that attack. And so you can see those metrics. Some highlights this year. Our technology coaches continue to have the opportunity to complete Google certifications and be reimbursed if they earn them. We did, as Joe mentioned, go one-to-one in the classroom with Chromebooks for our K-5 students, which is new this year. We did have a refresh of the 612 Chromebooks as well. That was touch and go with that supply chain issue, but they came in on time. We're kind of sitting there again. We did update over spring break our bandwidth to a 10 gig connection from a 1 gig connection, and that's true of this building, the middle school, high school, and our 3 in-town elementaries. Knapp and Downsville are on a West Wisconsin 24/7 internet connection of the 1 gig. We also replaced our phones district-wide this year. Instead of having to replace the whole system, we did replace just the physical phones themselves and then do some upgrades on RAM, so that we didn't have to, instead of spending about $500,000, we were able to spend closer to $100,000. We also updated the access points throughout the district. 154 in total between the middle school. I think every building had at least one, if not all, of their APs replaced. And then the middle school in Oakland, we had a bunch of Cat4 cabling in those buildings yet, so we completely demoed all of that out and had new cabling put in. That's Cat6 and Cat6A. We did formalize our cyber incident plan and how we respond to anything from like a service disruption or a hardware failure to an actual cybersecurity. We did also go through and update all of our network documentation. So every patch panel, every port is labeled and centralized in our department. We're also in the process of locking things down by configuring VLANs, and what that means in more simpler terms is if something plugs into this particular spot, they'll only work if it's a telephone, or it'll only work if it's a computer, so that if somebody would unplug something and plug something else in, it'll recognize that it's not the right type of device. And then we color coded the network cabling that just in an emergency, you got stressed out technicians, every orange cable means it's an access point, every blue cable means it's a computer or phone. And that just helps us identify really quickly what's plugged in. Some upcoming goals and projects. We are replacing our main storage solutions. So right now we're running most of our network resources on a couple of servers that will be replaced with an Nutanix storage box in July. We do have some switches that are being upgraded at ASU, Wakanda, and Knapp. We'll be moving fiber to cloud hosting, and that will allow updates to happen outside of our department. That'll all be taken care of for us as a managed resource. We continue to work on disaster recovery planning and network redundancy. Our work with Sync, Menomonie members also helps us with that, to have failovers and keep track of fiber. And then we continue to promote effective technology integration and curriculum to our coaches. We provide flexible professional development opportunities, and we're working on phasing out our phone PRIs. So like a current model, so we're working with AT&T on the project this summer. Any questions? Not a lot.
I'd just like to say thank you for all your work. I know it's been tough this year with everything going on, and this report is really good. I like it. We were talking about sending out fishing. Leaderfall does that too. They'll send out big ones and see how many people actually answer. And so that was a lot, 50%. So good answer. So So that's really important to point that out. Also, now I don't expect you to do this, but something that either post does is when you have an issue with technology, you have chat. So you can go on to the technology chat and somebody, and of course, they have millions of people, students and all kinds of people that can help out. But you can ask your question and they'll take over your computer and it just does something like that.
Yeah, we do a lot of remote support that way.
Questions? Charlie?
The bandwidth required to stream video versus the bandwidth required to do, say, a Zoom call, is that fairly similar?
Yeah, those will be comparable.
So according to your research then, nearly 1,000 of our students don't have the bandwidth to be able to do a Zoom call. So if we were virtual as an example, they wouldn't be able to do a very good job of getting the instruction. Would that be true? Would that be a true statement?
I would have to check the math on that, but it's that blue, the dark blue first on there. Is the
27.4.
Right, yeah. And then of the 27.4, 16.2 of that 27% can't stream at all. And then the 83.8% of the 27 would struggle to do it without interruption.
And sometimes it's worse to struggle than to not do it at all. When you're on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
I have a question, Katie. With the big outage that we had last year, what things have you done in lieu of that to try to make sure that we don't repeat that? It could never be positive, but it just be invested.
Right, so we, instead of starting that Simplicity box backup, that's our backup right now, our redundancy. So the current hardware that we're running off of, we have that backup. When we switch to Nutanix this summer, that's what one I did. We'll have 3 nodes, so that means 2 can go down. We only need 1 to operate, based on our stock is what we're storing. So there's some redundancy within that system, just like Simplicity, we have 4 nodes. We only actively need to use 2 at a time. It just so happens that all 4 fail at once. Okay. So we have the hardware redundancy in the system itself, plus we have these servers that we're running off of right now, that like if everything failed on Nutanix, we can move back to these servers.
And just to follow up, with those new servers that you're going to, or the sum of the 3 you said?
It's kind of it's a hybrid solution, so it's not as physical, but basically they're called nodes, but basically they hard drives.
But they won't have the same software issues that we have with the current system, or is that something?
I don't know that you can ever guarantee that, like these hard drives that we have, like, they just didn't communicate because it's kind of hard to explain. But basically, when we bought that system, it was owned by one company, and then the software was one company and the hardware ended up being another company. So they kind of pointed fingers back and forth. With Nutanix, it's all one company. So unless that would get split off at some point, we wouldn't have to worry about that.
Okay, thank you. Is there a question?
I heard much of this in the new orientation, and great job in, seeing that same information there. With the nap and downsville, I know you'd explained that the big difference between the 10 gig and the 1 gig is the fiber that runs through the Menomonie metro area, so to speak. So with nap and downsville, what will it take to have those kids have the internet they're gonna need down the road? I'm sure if the whole district was on 1 gig before, today it's not a huge issue, but I imagine at some point it becomes an issue, otherwise we wouldn't have went 10 gig in metro. So any future looking stuff that will help those 2 schools?
I think we keep watching, but really what we look at is like for the ISPs, to bring that there affordably. It took a long time to get to 1 gig and have it offered. We just switched both of those buildings to 1 gig last year. Before that, we didn't have that connection. I mean, part of it is still a copper connection even to get that 1 gig. So, some of that's depending on building out there. Right now, within our sync network, which is our internal connections, we have that self-provision fiber. It's not affordable to run lines, 7 miles out of town right But, you know, we keep watching, for that benefit, we keep watching for partners as that grows, you know. Every time a new clinic goes in, we get those nonprofits through HSHS, through Mayo. We look at opportunities, you know, if anything out there grows and they want to expand fiber, that might, we look for those partnerships to make that more affordable.
One more question. The staff fairly happy with the new computers that they've gotten? I know we did a lot of changeover last year. Was that been well received?
Yep, staff has been using MacBooks for several years, and so we continue with those. We have 2 more years before we do a refresh on the staff devices, so this is our 2nd year with that device. Our current educators are mostly on Chromebooks, and then we have our custodial uses a combination of Chromebooks and Windows, and our clerical tend to be on Windows devices. So.
Any other questions for Katie? Nice job. Thanks, Katie. Okay, move on to item 4C, COVID-19 report. Dr. Zadowski.
In the interest of time, I'll keep this very brief. You can read the report. I can continue to send out the weekly updates. Generally, COVID, we saw a bit of an increase after spring break and after the Easter holiday. It settled back down, and it almost seems like it might be reaching, you know, kind of a new normal or whatever. You know, the vaccinations are slowing down a bit in our area, and, you know, how that's going to impact future cases is really unknown at this time. So, you know, Dunn County is seeing around 5 cases a day, and I think there's, you know, outbreaks that happen that push that up sometimes, and then, you know, a day like today where there were no reported cases on the Dunn County system. So we continue to track it closely. We continue to focus on mitigation efforts, and as we look towards next year, we're still waiting guidance in terms of what is going to be recommended. You know, they did put out some stuff about schools about a month ago, and it sounds like there's more information coming out soon. And there's a conference call at the state level this week, and we'll continue to share information as it becomes available. Any questions tonight?
Okay, I think we move right along to the next one. SBA COVID-19 instructional plan for next year.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to keep it real brief. We are asking that the board provide approval of the instructional plan at the next board meeting. You can see that we have a timeline. When we did the family survey, the number of students interested in virtual programming was quite low. However, we still know that that is going to be an option preferred by some families. So the proposed timeline would be discussing this tonight, having the board consider it on May 10th. That would allow us to have an early virtual application deadline before school is out on June 1st. That we would get those students registered, make sure they get all the coursework that is needed for their schedule. We would have a final virtual application deadline on August 6th, and then we anticipate the full COVID-19 plan for next year to the board on August 9th. But with the instructional model, we talked prior to the family survey about the possibility of having the virtual offering more like more like the Safer at Home model, where we have teachers zooming in and having more synchronous instruction. And at that time, we thought perhaps there would be enough students at each grade level, or maybe even having to combine 1 or 2 grade levels to provide that option. We know that families prefer synchronous instruction when it's possible. But when we look at the numbers, 30 students over 13 grade levels, it just isn't feasible at this point to consider an actual Safer at Home model. So if you open the graphic, you can see that we are proposing an instructional model that is very similar to this year, actually almost identical, where we would utilize the WBS curriculum. We would still oversee that curriculum at the younger grades with an SDMA teacher. And the teachers do a great job with the kind of the homeroom check-ins and making sure that students are making as much progress as possible. And then at the older grade level, at the high school level, we've used WBS for years to supplement programming, and we would continue to do that. So I guess at this point, are there any questions or suggestions from the board?
Joe, can you just explain it? So we have the early virtual. What's the point of having an early and then an extra deadline? Like, why don't we just go August 6th? Can we just-
Well, if we push everything to August 6th,
Sure.
it's really a crunch for everybody. It's a crunch for WBS, it's a crunch for our tech staff, and it's a crunch for us because we don't want to overload one teacher with 60 kids. You know, so if we do an early deadline, if families already know that, you know, the pandemic could be essentially over and they still want virtual next year, we would like to get those people signed up and kind of get them organized, so we can have that part done. And we do know that there's families that are gonna wanna wait as long as they can to see what the conditions are related to the pandemic. So we wanna give them more time, and that's why we talked about having kind of two deadlines, and we think it makes sense.
Just a question, what happens if, let's say you get a bunch of people on June 1st that sign up and get ready for, the virtual school, and then all of a sudden, summer goes by, and all of a sudden, it looks like the pandemic is really low and things are looking good, and they want to come back, can they change their mind before August 6th?
Well, we have been allowing students to re-enroll in the schools. There is a certain drop time with the WBS program that could allow that to happen. We will ask, however, the families make that semester-long commitment, and if we can accommodate, we will. But again, you know, it depends on what kind of spacing is expected in our classrooms. It depends on, you know, how much staffing we have that's available. You know, it could involve, you know, maybe having a student not being at their neighborhood school. So we try to work with those families in those situations, but we still need to have a commitment one way or another.
I understand the commitment before school start, I don't know if I think they change their mind. I think they really on June 1st, and then before school started, they might, go back to either.
It's possible.
Chris?
And so this is the same thing as we had last time, except for the WBS, except that there's not tied to any transitions, and it's sort of like part of what happens. So I see that these models there, but what kind of guidance do they have for understanding when they make transitions, or what guidance would we be taking? And then if it is being put more into administrative decisions where you have to make decisions based on the best information that you have, that really is the piece that really has to be put in there. So, you know, you guys have a good track record of making decisions responding to, you know, COVID threats, what have you. But if that's your intention, is that there is no guidance whatsoever, that it's purely administrative, yeah, that's making that happen, that really should happen. Well, if there is a guidance that's going on in terms of what those transitions are, and I assume there probably are some sense of how we're going to move between the different models, then that really needs to be, that's the questions I have about this. Obviously, I have any questions about these different, you know, learning models, but what I know is how you get from one to the other.
And Chris, that's what you'll see on August 9th when we have the full COVID plan, and you're talking about thresholds and transitions. Right now, we're just talking about the instructional programming. But I appreciate what you're saying, that, you know, people would like to know, and I really, really liked how you put it in a couple meetings back about, you know, essentially we're going to innovate. You know, we're going to see what the pandemic throws at us. We're going to see what the needs of our kids and families are, and our ability to staff, and we'll innovate from there. I really like how you use that word. But that part, the transition part, that would be part of the full COVID plan. In terms of what we're talking about tonight, really is just the instructional model. And that's really where we need a decision to ensure that the board is going to support the instructional model, the offerings. We'll build that piece first, and then, you know, by August 9th, we'll have the transition part done.
Just to follow up, the problem then be, if that's coming out on August 9th, and parents don't have information before they make their first application deadline. I'm not sure you've spoken that it's going to be rolled out before, I'm saying transitions, but parents wouldn't even know the transitions or what the policy is going to be for how you create those transitions, what that's going to look like. Because I think that was where there was some confusion last time.
Yeah.
So you want to get that done probably by the, I don't know, there's a big gap between June 1st and August 6th, but definitely they want to know that before that virtual application deadline.
That's an interesting point, and that makes sense. I guess the challenge I have with that is, even if we put the COVID plan together, and say that, for instance, masks will be required. I know that's going to be a big decision point for a lot of people on both sides. You we could come up with something even now, or July 4th or whatever date we put in there. But if we put that in there and lock it in and don't, let people know that, we're gonna innovate, I think that's gonna be challenging, and I think it could really, be problematic for the district if we lock something in August or, June or whatever date it is, without the idea that we're gonna innovate as need be.
Carl, a question. So we have instructed this year successfully with all these models, and we right now have thresholds in place, right? To move in between based on community, disease, activity and so forth.
No,
No.
We went to a different way, we said we were making transitions.
Okay.
and we never went to that.
So my point is, we have a way we're deciding right now. And that would, I assume, be carried forward into this plan until a new way of deciding thresholds between these levels came out, which is what you're asking for is, do we need to define something differently? But we could move forward and say in writing, it's the same as it is now, unless new data comes out, new recommendations come out. We learn more from, research and all of these things, which is the innovation part that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's really, and Chris is partially right. We don't have clear, burden levels that are automatically going to force us to close or, whatever. When we came into the year, we thought that if things got to a certain level that, we may have to go blended to reduce enrollment. But what we found once we started the year is that we were able to get to 6 feet. So when we worked with the health department, really we had a choice, either get to 6 feet or go alternating enrollment so that we can get to 6 feet. Well, we didn't have to do the blended and alternating enrollment because we were able to achieve that. It's just so hard to say though what the expectation is going to be. I just read a study out at MIT that talked about the 6 feet really not even being a reasonable measure. And really it's more about, each situation almost needs its own calculation based on ventilation, based on the type of activity that's happening in that room. So it's going to continue to be an evolving piece. But I think your point is good, Carl, that when we ask people to sign up, we're going to, and Chris was, I think this is what he was saying too, we're going to have to give them some idea of what the current thought is of what to expect for those circumstances. Because otherwise, how do you make that decision?
And as a follow-up, as a parent, I think that was the most challenging thing for me last fall. My kids did go in person, but it was a struggle to decide because we weren't sure where those decisions would be based on. And having a background in healthcare and nursing, I realized what we know today is very different than we knew 9 months ago. And so I'm completely on board with these things have to adapt. As we know what we know today, hindsight is super clear. But that is just a agreeable point, that the more we can say, here's what we know today, here's the decisions we make, will help people decide better where's the fit for them.
One thing to the plan with Bill is that we do think enrollment will be higher than it was this year. So to get to 6 feet is going to be harder this fall than it is right now.
Absolutely.
One point I'd like to make for those that are new board members is that, part of the reason we were able to get 6 feet is because the teachers worked very hard and the shop people worked very hard to try to find all of them, when I guess they were meeting in the field house and a lot of those places too, to keep that 6 feet. So it wasn't just like we automatically, it just happened. It, there was a little time for that.
A lot of it.
The health department said 6 feet.
Yeah, about the end of September, going into the year, Cte Coordinator was very supportive of our plan. But then actually we were looking at trying to innovate to get 6 feet prior to that order, even because of the number of exclusions we were noticing. And that was something that was not anticipated, that those exclusions would be as high as they are. That's a whole other thing. I would anticipate there's going to continue to be changes with the policies at the state and national level. And, I've been advocating for the contact tracing definition to be changed because to me, the health department saying 3 feet is okay, but then leaving the definition at 6 feet is gonna lead to a ton of exclusions in schools. And we lived that at the beginning of the fall or middle of the fall. But back to the actual agenda item, in terms of the instructional plan, does this look like what the board can support at the next meeting for instruction?
Okay,
All right, we'll bring it back then.
okay,
Thank you.
I think so. Item 4.8, the COVID-19 funding.
So, I see Leah's coming up, and I appreciate that. I think probably the best thing we can do is just give you a brief summary, and hopefully you've had some time to read the report. But, Leah, could you just run down what the allocations are for our school district, please?
Sure. We've received 3 funds in total. ESSER 1, we received this year. ESSER 2, we just received the notice here in April. ESSER 1, we received just under 500,000. It was 482,000. ESSER 2 is 1.726 million. We just received that notice. And then ESSER 3, we haven't received the official notice from DPI yet, but they are anticipating we should be receiving around 3.8 million in those funds. And flexibility with when those funds can be spent is pretty good. I mean, we have through June 2024 to spend the ESSER 3 funds, so we have quite a bit of time to spend those funds.
So, to give you an idea of where these funds have been used, ESSER 1 is already spent, the $482,931. And when you look at all the initial expenses we had with adding technology, hand sanitizer, all that stuff, that went very, very quickly. ESSER 2, the 1.7 million, that has not been allocated yet. However, Leah, you were informing me today that in the budgeting process for next year, when we look at the staffing plan that the board recently approved, that whole 1.7 million will be applied towards next year's staffing plan and all the extra staffing that we're anticipating for COVID. Now, that could fluctuate a bit one way or another. The staffing plan you approved gave us permission to hire up to a certain number of teachers, up to a certain number of employees based on what is needed. So that we could come in under that, which could leave a balance for other qualified expenditures. And then the ESSER 3, the 3.8 million, like Leah said, that goes out to 2024. And I would be very cautious to commit those dollars at this point. Just studying what's happening with the state budget and trying to interpret what is being discussed in Madison, and if Clint could chime in, he certainly could if he wants to. I'll be very interested to see what happens at the state level with public education funding. Everyone knows that our schools are receiving these monies. I know when I testified to the Joint Finance Committee, I tried to explain to the committee that, we will spend this and more when it comes to, recovering from COVID. But depending on what happens at the state level, it'll be interesting to see if we get an inflationary increase that can cover the increased costs of basic programming, or if we're going to be expected to use these funds for both basic programming type of activities.
Yeah, one thing I will add is under the ESSER 2, it is kind of disappointing. I thought our district would get a little bit more out of the in-person incentive, but that kind of got shot down. So the ESSER 3, as Dr. Joe alluded to, ought to be very cautionary to spend because there's just so much uncertainty out there right now. What's going to go on? I don't really have a lot more information because we're still kind of in the information gathering part of this from the joint finance hearings, and they're all sitting down basically to rework kind of a budget. So with that, I don't really have a whole lot to add.
A couple things we are looking at, substitutes we know are going to continue to be a challenge for schools. Our school district will be no exception. I know we've talked in the past about Sam working on some sort of incentivized program for substitute teachers, or whether we look at full-time subs again or some combination of both. And that's something we need to figure out for next year, and we anticipate that ESSER could be a piece to that. Another thing is summer school, and looking at the summer school programming, we still have about 20 vacancies for teachers that we will need if we're going to be able to provide all the summer programming that we would like to. And that's a terrific avenue for us to address some of the learning loss measures that are noted in the grant awards. So again, that might be an area where we bring to the board a recommendation for how we could disproportionately impact summer school and make sure that we can staff it the way that we feel like we need to. So it certainly is nice to know that, we kind of took a leap of faith. That's the way I've been saying it. The board was just terrific coming into this year, saying that whatever we had to do, we were going to do to get through the pandemic and provide as much in-person instruction as we could. At the same time, it's a little daunting not knowing whether or not those funds will be needed for basic programming, or if we'll be able to innovate and perhaps get more creative in trying to serve our students and families.
Any questions?
Quick question. You mentioned, Clint, that not additional funding for in-person instruction. Can someone just elaborate super briefly?
Yeah, there was a plan out there that would have included, Menomonie, in my opinion, would have been in good shape, because compared to certain parts of the state where they did not have in-person instruction for quite a while. In fact, there's still some districts out there that do not have in-person currently. That was originally going to be a plan to kind of incentivize or reward those districts that did the hard work. Like, we were actually one of the rare ones, because we offered both. It was very rare for a district to offer a full virtual choice and a full in-person choice. That plan kind of got shot down by our governor.
What the state was, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Joe. Move on to item F, 2021 budget revisions.
Okay, each spring, we request the board approve budget revisions. In the attached report that I provided you, I wrote those budget revisions down by fund. So the first fund I have listed there is Fund 10. If you take a look at the big grouping at the top for Fund 10, the reason identified there says general budget revisions net zero. Those budget revisions are simply either department heads or the site budget managers requested that funds be moved from one account to another account. It requires board approval, but the net impact is zero on the overall Fund 10 budget. So those are grouped together because of that. And then I broke it, the rest of it, I broke down by program areas and the grants. We had quite a few grant revisions this go round. I would like to say too, for E-rate, that number is rather high. We had a reduction in the E-rate revenues and projects, but that was simply because when we originally budgeted for those projects, we weren't sure if the vendors would be able to give us discounted billing. And then in the end, they were able to, so that dropped down our costs. And then also we didn't have to recoup that revenue because they provided us with that discounted billing. And then Fund 27 is our special education fund. We just had a couple revisions there for the flow-through grant and the preschool grant. And then also Fund 38, we had a change in our non-referendum debt budget because this was the last year of our Fund 38 debt service payment, and we had some funds sitting in fund balance in that fund, and we used those funds to decrease our Fund 38 final payment. And then food service, Michelle had the food service director had some budget revisions there, moving funds from one account to another. And then also we had some budget revision changes like that in Fund 80 as well. Anybody have any questions?
Anybody? Okay. Thank you, Leah. Okay, moving on. Extracurricular staff contract request. Any questions on that? Okay, and next meeting date, board meeting reports, our next scheduled meeting is May 10th. With that, I think we'll take a 5-minute recess and we will go to close. Thanks, everybody.